How you doing? I'm Joe Dallas. Good to see you. I want to talk to you this week about a bill that is making its way through Washington State, is probably going to be repeated in other states around the country. In referring to it, I like to use the phrase parental discretion denied. Parental discretion denied. Okay, earlier this week, the state of Washington passed this bill, which would do three things. One, it would allow teens or minors who identify as transgender to literally run away from home, state sanctioned running away, and stay in what they call host homes, again, sponsored by, provided by the state. Secondly, the bill would allow these host homes, the people who host them, to keep the kids without letting their parents know where they are. Again, state sanctioned. What they would do or who they would contact would be not the families, but the Washington Department of Child, Youth, and Family. Got to let that sink in, okay? The state is saying we will hereby make it legal and even state sponsored for a kid who identifies as transgendered to leave home and to stay in a place we will provide them, and they will not be required to contact their parents, and the host will not be required to contact their parents. Your parents could, or excuse me, your kids could just leave, and the state says, that's okay, we're going to keep you in the dark. And finally, after those kids have left home, this bill would allow them to get hormone injections, puberty blockers, and other forms of what they call transition treatment without parental consent, even without parental knowledge. Literally, your kid could just disappear, show up at one of these homes and say, hey, I'm trans, but my parents will not allow me to take hormone blockers or puberty blockers or do other surgical or medical forms of transition. So don't tell them I'm here. Don't tell them what I'm doing and get me the treatment. And they could do it. Now, this Senate bill 5599, it passed the House this week. It's on its way to Governor Inslee for approval. It calls itself the act which, quote, is relating to supporting youth. Relating to supporting youth. Sounds good. It supports youth who are seeking what they call protected health services. It all sounds pretty benign. What are protected health services? Oh, any medical or surgical procedures that have to do with transitioning. And those services will be provided without parental consent if they decide that the parents are guilty of abuse or neglect. What constitutes you being guilty of abuse or neglect? Refusing to get your kid what they call protected health services. See how it works? I mean, you and I would agree. If a kid is literally in danger, I mean, he's got a life or death kind of a condition, and for whatever reason, the parents are saying, no, we don't want him to get medical care, the state would be right to step in and say, hey, we're taking your kid then. This kid is not going to be allowed to die just because you don't want to give him necessary treatment. Well, now they've just broadened the definition of necessary treatment to include medical transitioning for transgenders. And if the state says, well, that falls under the umbrella of necessary treatment, then if you will deny that to your child, you are the problem, not your child, not your child's belief that he is something she is not, or she is something he is not, or whatever. No, no, no. You're the problem because you are, well, archaic enough to believe that if your child was born male, he will always be male. If your child was born female, she will always be born female. Now, who does this bill provide services to? Minors who are, and I'm quoting from the bill's wording now, minors who are two-spirit, meaning they have both the masculine and the feminine spirit, or they are transgender, or they are non-binary, or they have, quote, other gender diverse, end quote, issues. It's a very broad category. So basically, here's how it'll play out if that bill is passed. In the state of Washington, if your 14-year-old says, Mom, Dad, I am this, and you say, no, 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 you are that. And your child says, no, I am this, and I'm going to have my body reconfigured to match what I say I am, the state will take your child's word over yours. They will even go so far as to say you are abusing or neglecting your child. So thank you very much. We will take it from here. You know, if you're even thinking of watching something racy on television that your kid might see, there's a thing that comes up saying parental discretion advised. But if your kid wants to literally redo their body in permanent ways, by the way, Now the sign says parental discretion denied. Okay, what are we dealing with here? Well, first, we're dealing with cultural madness, right? I mean, the times are not just immoral, the times are nuts. This conversation is nuts. Did you, seriously, 5 years ago, did you think we would even be talking about such a thing? It sounds so futuristic and so weird. And if I heard a Christian saying 5 years from now, this is what we'll be dealing with, I would have thought, wow, you really are an extremist. You're a conspiracy theorist. Don't be so alarmist. But no, this is the season of cultural madness, not just immorality, madness. Of course, that's nothing new. Paul hit on that, didn't he? Romans 1:28, when he started describing the human condition, and he said, quote, "And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient," which that literally means things that don't fit, things that just don't fall into place. Not just things that are wrong, but things that are not fitting, you see? So, Genesis 1:1 says, "In the beginning, God." And you know what? There was order, right? In the beginning, God is sovereign over the earth, and he speaks order to everything. Now, in the year 2023, we don't want to retain the knowledge of that God. So what have we lost? Order. We're going nuts. Now, what we are seeing right now as we speak is a dismantling of everything he both intended and created. The transgender ideology is a good example. Transgender is not just a condition whereby somebody thinks they're in the wrong body or is confused as to what their identity is. It's an ideology, and it's a cult. I mean, a literal cult where people are so locked into a belief system they're willing to do anything to defend it and promote it and even force it onto people. Now, we also know that a lot of kids claim to be transgender when in fact it is transitional. They are going through a phase. Now, last week on this podcast, I talked about what I called transgendering, when it's a trend. And I posed the rhetorical question, is transitioning transitional? Well, frequently it is. If you haven't heard that episode, would you please check out last week's episode, Transgendering, where we talk a little more about the statistics showing that, yes, in many cases, kids literally outgrow this. So how stupid and evil it is to allow them to make a permanent decision when their mind is still forming, and there's a very good chance they're going to shift out of that ideology anyway. It makes you feel as though you're nuts. Well, that's exactly what Rudyard Kipling was talking about in my favorite poem of all time, If. First lines of that are beautiful. If you can keep your head when those around you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. Well, if you can do that, you can keep your head in a time of madness. How are we going to do that? First, we got to look at living the faithful life. Faithful life. Philippians 2:15, Paul said that you may be blameless and harmless, sons of God without rebuke in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation among whom you shine as lights in the world. Hey, one of the most effective blows we can strike against all this craziness, let you and I get our own act together, okay? Let's be living faithful lives. I think you know what I'm talking about. Where you know there's an ongoing deliberate sin in your life, man, put it away. You can't rail against this problem if you are secretly a part of the problem. If you're doing it privately, that doesn't mean that it's any less wrong. You're actually weakening yourself and the entire body of Christ. We got a calling now more than ever to be what Paul said we are. Sons of God without rebuke in the midst of a crooked, perverse nation among whom you shine as lights in the world. There's the faithful life, and then there's the faithful speech. We're called first to live it, then we're called to speak it. We're called to speak it because, number one, we need to express the heart and mind of God regardless of the outcome. Number two, there are people who will hear us, and we never know who they're going to be. So wisdom, according to Proverbs 120, is throwing a holy fit in front of everybody. Wisdom cries aloud in the street. She utters her voice in the broad places. She cries in the chief place of concourse at the entrance of the gate in the city. She's got a big mouth. What's wrong with us? Wisdom is very bold. What's she saying? She utters her words, "How long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? And scoffers delight those in scoffing, and fools hate knowledge. How long are you going to do this madness?" That's part of the prophetic message the church needs to be speaking to the world today. We really do. We're dealing with madness. We need to say so. So first of all, What are we dealing with here? We're dealing with cultural madness. We're also dealing with government reach. Now we are, okay? Wherever there's identity politics, there's government growth. Identity politics are a big government dream. Because if you impose identity politics, then you create bureaucracies, which means you expand government reach, you expand government staff, you expand government control over people. Identity politics are a big government dream. Look, I don't believe for a minute that all of the government officials who support this sort of insanity genuinely believe in what they're doing, but they know darn well if they do it, it's going to expand the reach of the government. I think that's their goal more than transgender ideology or any of the other ideologies that they say they're really believing in. I think what they want to really push is much more government control over the people. Now, robust Christianity is always a thorn in the side to big government. It always is. Well, we need to be that thorn, not because we want to be a thorn, but because we want to be lively enough, robust enough, energized enough to speak truth, even when we're speaking truth to a very hostile power. And when we're refusing to go along with the program, which we have to do, we absolutely have to. Look, Christians traditionally have not just been persecuted for what they do, it's frequently for what they don't do. God's people have often been persecuted not for what they do, but for what they don't do. Daniel and his buddies come to mind. Nope, we will not bow to the idol. No, we're not going to participate in this. Christians in Rome come to mind. No, we will not say Caesar is Lord. Okay, we're not trying to make trouble, but we're not going to do what you're asking us to do. Well, that's enough to get you in big trouble. So we're dealing with government reach. Third, we are dealing with spiritual forces. Let's not overlook that. We're dealing with madness. A significant part of the culture is just going crazy. And it's the madness of a culture that did not want to retain the knowledge of God. Secondly, we're dealing with government reach, which looks at the madness and goes far out. That's a setup for us to take control because these people are out of control. Big Brother will step in and solve everything for you, little boys and girls. Well, there's a spiritual dynamic behind that, though. It's a lot more sinister than the natural government dynamic. That's the spiritual one. I pointed this out in last week's episode. Let me repeat it. Jesus said in describing Satan, the thief comes not but to kill and destroy, not but to kill and destroy. Satan saw Adam and Eve created. He saw the beautiful environment they were created in. He saw the plan for the family, for man, for woman, for children, the future of what God had ordained. And he said, I'll take that. He saw humanity's definition and he saw humanity's beauty. He destroyed the beauty. Now he's going after the definition. He's already successfully largely destroyed the beauty of the male and female, obscured it, disfigured it, made us even ashamed of our basic gender differences. Now he's going after the definitions themselves. The beauty of sexuality included faithfulness and naturalness, natural desires, faithful covenant. Now we're obscuring even the definition of sexuality as a male-female union. Now, what can we do about all this? Okay, if this is what we're dealing with, we've got to get to our post, P-O-S-T. I'm throwing bumper sticker sayings at you, but I think this is important. Post. Prayer, outrage, strategy, teach. Prayer. We need, and let's think this through and pass it on. We need concerted, organized, ongoing, deep intercessory prayer against this madness. Now, this ideology, this cult, this movement, this evil is after our kids. Literally. It is after them to divide them from you, the parents. It is after them to tell them, in your confusion, we want to confirm you. Therefore, we will protect you from the parents who will try to bring you out of confusion. We will keep you there, and thereby you will belong to us. We want you. That they do. That's a spiritual force empowering all of this. We need intercession. We need church-wide, nationwide intercession. The saints need to come together. We need to facilitate concerted efforts to pray, intercede, intervene spiritually, fight that battle. We need prayer. We need outrage. I'm disappointed in how nice we've been about all of this. Really disappointed. I'm appreciative of some degree of pushback we're starting to see against transgender ideology, but I don't think the voice coming from the church is nearly as strong and as clear as it needs to be. In fact, some of the most powerful prophetic voices against transgender ideology aren't even Christian. They're just people of either other worldviews or of no particular religious worldview at all who are saying, this is nuts, the emperor is naked. We need more of that in the church. Outrage. A lot of believers today are saying, well, I don't want to get political. I don't want to get political. Hey, this isn't politics. When you fight against evil and when you fight for your rights as parents, you're not getting political, you're getting responsible, okay? That doesn't mean you're getting Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or Independent. That's not political. That's responsible. We need more outrage. We need strategy. We need the strategy of finding a way to keep our kids, I'll just say it plainly, out of the public school system. The public school system has proven itself to be hostile to the family and to all normal ideas of human sexuality and identity. And I don't believe it can be rehabilitated. I don't believe it's going to be rehabilitated. As much as possible, we've got to get our kids out of public school and into either private Christian schools, private schools, or homeschooling. We need to work together to develop homeschool networks. Now, we can do this. We've done it before in other areas, in other ways. I believe when we're at our best, we put together our creative forces and we create alternatives. That's what we need to do. And we need to stay informed. You know, my good friend Brad Dacus heads up the Pacific Justice Institute, and you'll see the link to their website there. The Pacific Justice Institute can inform you if you personally are feeling threatened by the government to bow down to this kind of an ideology. Contact the Pacific Justice Institute. If you want to know how to build a homeschool network, contact the Pacific Justice Institute. They can let you know what steps you need to take. Then finally, that's prayer, outreach, strategy, teach. We need to make sure in our churches we know what we believe and why we believe it. We need to be teaching the basics on what God intended for human sexuality and what we call sexual male-female identity. We need to teach. We need to be making our apologia. Our apologia is our legal defense. Our legal defense. That's what an apologist does. This is the season of the apologist. Because we are facing a time of unprecedented darkness in America, by which I believe the average godly citizen is now openly at odds with a government that is growing stronger and more hostile to the basics of the faith. It's easy to want to cave at a time like that. But I remember what Holocaust survivor Corrie ten Boom said when the Holocaust had begun and the Nazis had overrun her homeland in Holland, and they were sheltering Jews from Nazi persecution, and it was becoming clearer and clearer that more and more people were finding out what they were doing and they were in danger. And in her book, The Hiding Place, she said, once again, we considered abandoning our work, and once again, we knew we could not. This was evil's hour. We could not run away from it. Perhaps only when human effort had tried its best and failed would God's power alone be free to work. And there it is. Hey, it's good talking with you about this. We are here every Friday. If you haven't yet subscribed to this podcast, I sure wish you would. We'd love to have you join our community. Just hit that bell. Let me know you subscribed. I'd like to thank you personally for that. Also, if you'd like to help us continue providing free material in our ministry here, Cloudfire Ministries, we're trying to provide online material that is biblically based and very practical and relevant to the times we're in. So if that suits your vision and you want to partner with us in that, would you just go to joedallas.com/giving, joedallas.com/giving. That'll show you how you can partner with us. Well, hey, I will look forward to seeing you next Friday. Meanwhile, let's keep in mind our job description as servants of the Lord. Paul told Timothy, the servant of the Lord must not strive, but be gentle to all, apt to teach, patient, in meekness, instructing those who oppose themselves, if perhaps God will grant them repentance according to the knowledge of the truth. Ain't that the truth? Let's remember, when it comes to truth, it is not just where you stand, it's also how you stand. Hey, thanks for being here. See you next week. God bless.